The flickering candlelight cast long, dancing shadows across the grim face of General George Washington. It was the deep, suffocating autumn of 1778, a season of mud and blood that seemed to mirror the fortunes of his Continental Army. Outside his headquarters in New Windsor, New York, the wind howled like a banshee, a mournful cry for the thousands of lives already lost in the struggle for a nation that was still more of an idea than a reality. The dream of liberty felt fragile, as thin and worn as the threadbare coats of his soldiers. Washington pushed aside a stack of dispatches, the ink bleeding on the cheap paper. Defeat, retreat, disarray. The words blurred into a familiar, bitter litany. 2 years had passed since the triumphant declaration in Philadelphia, yet the British Lion's grip on New York City was tighter than ever. The city, once a bustling hub of colonial commerce, had become the unbreachable fortress of the Crown, the nerve center from which General Sir Henry Clinton directed the full might of the British war machine. From that occupied island, Clinton could strike anywhere, his formidable Royal Navy controlling the waterways, his disciplined redcoats marching with an unnerving confidence that Washington's beleaguered, often barefoot, army could only envy. The loss of New York had been more than a strategic catastrophe. It was a deep psychological wound. Washington knew he was fighting blind. His enemy moved with precision, armed not just with muskets and cannons, but with superior intelligence. He, on the other hand, was deaf and dumb to their intentions. He knew Clinton was planning something, a decisive blow to crush the rebellion once and for all. But what and when? Every decision he made was a gamble in the dark, a desperate prayer against a hidden dagger. The ghost of Nathan Hale haunted him. The young captain, a Yale classmate of his own Major Benjamin Talmadge, had been full of fire and patriotic zeal. He had volunteered for the impossible, to walk into the lion's den of New York City and gather intelligence. But zeal was no substitute for training. Hale was caught almost immediately, a spy's noose his only reward. His last defiant words, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country," were a testament to his courage, but to Washington they were also a grim reminder of a catastrophic failure. Amateurism in the world of espionage was a death sentence. He could not afford to lose another patriot so cheaply. He needed something different, something more. He needed a weapon the British would never see coming. It was in this crucible of desperation that the idea began to form, not of a single spy, but of a silent, interconnected web, a network of ordinary people living extraordinary double lives, hidden in plain sight. He needed eyes and ears behind enemy lines, a phantom army that fought not with bayonets, but with whispers and secrets. He summoned Major Benjamin Talmadge. Talmadge was a brilliant officer, young but already a veteran of the cruelest fighting of the war. More importantly, he was a man of keen intellect and fierce loyalty, with a network of childhood friends back on his native Long Island, a place now groaning under British occupation. He understood the cost of failure intimately. Nathan Hale had been his friend. "Ben," Washington began, his voice low and grave, the candlelight carving deep lines into his weary face. "We cannot outfight them. Not now. Not while they hold New York. We must outthink them. We must know their plans before they do." Talmadge, his dragoon officer's uniform immaculate despite the surrounding gloom, nodded slowly. He knew what was coming. The general had been hinting at it for weeks. "Another attempt at intelligence in the city, sir?" "Not an attempt," Washington corrected, his gaze sharp and intense. "A permanent solution. A ring, secretive, disciplined. No one must know who is in it, not even me. I will direct the operations, but you, Major, will be my only link. You will be its spy master." The weight of the command settled on Talmadge's shoulders. It was a task fraught with peril, a path that led directly to the gallows if even the smallest detail went awry. But it was also the only path that might lead to victory. Hale's death would not be in vain. This time they would do it right. This time they would build a network so secret, so meticulously designed, that it could operate for years without detection. "I have a few men in mind," Talmadge said, his mind already racing, connecting names and places from his youth in Setauket, a small town on the north shore of Long Island, right under the nose of the British. Men who know the land, men who hate the occupation, farmers, tavern keepers, simple men. "Simple men are the least suspected," Washington replied, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "This ring will need a name, a code name to protect its correspondence." He paused, looking at a map of Virginia on the wall, his thoughts drifting to his home. "We will call it the Culper Ring." The name was taken from Culpeper County, Virginia, a place Washington knew well. It was unassuming, meaningless to the British, but for him it was a link to the land they were fighting for. And so, in the flickering candlelight of a desperate autumn, the most sophisticated and successful intelligence network of the American Revolution was born. It would be comprised of a small group of trusted civilians who risked everything.
Chapter 1. The Reluctant Farmer. Abraham Woodhull hated the water. He hated the biting, salty spray that whipped across the Long Island Sound, and he hated the unpredictable lurch of the small boat beneath his feet. Most of all, he hated what the water represented, the only path to the occupied city of New York, and the dangerous game he was being asked to play. A farmer from Setauket, his hands were calloused from the plow, not skilled in the subtle arts of deception. Ben Talmadge had been his friend since boyhood, a bond forged in the fields and shores of their small town. When Ben, now a decorated major in the Continental Army, had approached him, Abraham had wanted to say no. Spying was for soldiers, for adventurers, not for a quiet, cautious man whose only ambition was to tend his family's land and live in peace. But peace was a distant memory. Setauket, like all of Long Island, was now enemy territory. Redcoats patrolled the roads, their condescending presence a constant reminder of their subjugation. His own father, a respected local judge, had been roughed up by British troops who suspected him of patriot sympathies. The war was not a distant affair of armies and generals. It was here, in his home, a poison in the soil he tilled. "I need you, Abraham," Ben had insisted, his voice urgent. "You have a legitimate reason to travel to New York. You sell your produce. No one would suspect you." And so Abraham found himself on a boat, a sack of cabbages at his feet, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. He had a code name now, Samuel Culper. It felt foreign on his tongue, a mask he was certain would slip. His mission was simple, yet terrifying. He was to travel to the city, observe British troop movements, listen to the chatter in the taverns and markets, and report back. He was to be the anchor of the Culper Ring on Long Island. His contact in the city was a man even more deeply embedded and even more reluctant, Robert Townsend. Using the alias Samuel Culper, Jr., Townsend was a Quaker merchant who ran a dry goods store and was a part owner of a coffee house frequented by high-ranking British officers. His position gave him unparalleled access to the enemy's inner circle, but his pacifist beliefs made him an unlikely spy. It was Woodhull's job to persuade him, to convince him that some principles were worth fighting for, even if the fighting was done in the shadows. Stepping onto the wharf in Manhattan, Woodhull was plunged into a city transformed. The Great Fire of 1776, which had consumed a quarter of the city, had left behind a landscape of blackened ruins and skeletal remains of once grand buildings. The air was thick with the smell of coal smoke and the stench of an overcrowded military camp. The city was a brutal, oppressive place under martial law, where civilians, even loyalists, chafed under the restrictions. Redcoats were everywhere, their arrogance a constant friction against the sullen resentment of the populace. Press gangs roamed the streets, grabbing men for forced service in the Royal Navy, while military courts offered little justice for crimes committed by soldiers. The war was not a distant affair of armies and generals. It was here, in his home, a poison in the soil he tilled. Making his way to Townsend's store, his farmer's clothes making him all but invisible in the chaotic streetscape, he found Townsend, a man of quiet intensity, tallying figures in a ledger. The merchant's face was a mask of careful neutrality. "I have an order from a Mr. John Bolton," Woodhull said softly, using the code name for Benjamin Talmadge. Townsend didn't look up. "Leave it on the counter." The initial meetings were fraught with tension. Townsend was terrified, convinced they were being watched. He wanted no part of the scheme. "My business, my family, a single mistake could destroy everything," he argued in hushed tones in the back of his shop. "And what of the country? Will there be anything left for our families if we do nothing?" Woodhull countered, his own fear giving way to a hardening resolve. It took weeks, but slowly Woodhull's quiet persistence wore down Townsend's resistance. The turning point came when Townsend overheard a group of British officers in his coffee shop boasting about a plan to counterfeit continental currency, a scheme designed to shatter the fragile American economy. The cold, calculated cynicism of the plan offended Townsend's Quaker sense of morality. He realized that neutrality was no longer an option. He agreed to become Culper Jr. The chain of communication they established was a masterpiece of clandestine ingenuity. Townsend, as Culper Jr., would gather intelligence in New York. He would pass his reports to a courier, Austin Rowe, a tavern keeper from Setauket, who made regular trips to the city for supplies. Rowe, a man of immense courage, would ride the treacherous 55 miles back to Setauket, hiding the messages within his goods. Once in Setauket, Rowe would deliver the message to Woodhull at his farm. Now the most dangerous part of the journey began, crossing the British-patrolled Long Island Sound to Talmadge in Connecticut. This crucial link was entrusted to Caleb Brewster, a brash and daring whaleboat captain who knew every cove and current of the Sound. Brewster was everything Woodhull was not, a natural risk-taker who seemed to thrive on danger. But how would Brewster know when a message was ready for pickup without raising suspicion? The answer came from another of Talmadge's childhood friends, Anna Strong. Living on a farm with a clear view of the Sound, Anna devised a simple but brilliant system. She would hang a black petticoat on her clothesline, a signal that Brewster could easily see from his boat, indicating that a message was ready. The number of white handkerchiefs hanging next to it would signal which of the 6 hidden coves Brewster should use for the rendezvous. It was a code hidden in the most mundane of domestic chores, invisible to the British patrols. To further protect their communications, they employed multiple layers of security. Talmadge developed a complex code system, assigning numbers to 763 common words, names, and places from a popular dictionary. General Washington himself was designated as Agent 711. They also used invisible ink, a sympathetic stain that became visible only when a second chemical was applied. Letters were written between the lines of seemingly innocent personal or business correspondence. Secrecy was so paramount that General Washington himself did not know the true identities of his spies, referring to them only by their code names. The Culper ring was now operational. A farmer, a merchant, a tavern keeper, a whaleboat captain, and a housewife. an unlikely band of patriots, bound by trust and a shared belief in a cause that seemed, by all conventional measures, to be lost. They were about to prove that in the new kind of war Washington envisioned, courage was not only measured on the battlefield.
Chapter 2. A Chain of Whispers. The first piece of credible intelligence came from the most unlikely of sources, a complaint about the quality of port wine. Inside his coffee house on Hanover Square, Robert Townsend moved silently between tables, his face a perfect mask of the deferential proprietor. He refilled mugs, wiped down polished wood, and listened. Always he listened. The room was a cacophony of British voices, officers of the line, quartermasters, naval captains, all feeling secure deep within the heart of their military stronghold. Their arrogance was Townsend's greatest asset. That evening, a portly major from the Quartermaster Corps was holding court, his voice booming over the clatter of tankards. He was lamenting a delayed shipment of supplies. "And General Clinton expects us to be ready to march at a moment's notice," he grumbled to his companions. "Move in the 33rd and 42nd Regiments up the Hudson to reinforce Stony Point is one thing, but doing it without proper provisions for the winter quarters is sheer madness." His friend, a naval lieutenant, scoffed. "You Army men think you have it so hard. Try refitting the HMS Eagle in this damned port. Half the timber is green, and the press gangs aren't bringing in enough able-bodied seamen to crew a fishing smack. We'll be lucky if she's seaworthy by spring." To anyone else, it was idle chatter, the routine grumbling of military men. To Townsend, writing under the code name Samuel Culper, Jr., it was pure gold. 2 specific regiments, a specific destination, and a detailed status of one of the Royal Navy's most powerful warships. He retired to his back room, the ledger open before him. To the casual observer, he was doing his accounts. In reality, he was carefully drafting a letter to his sister in Setauket, complaining about the price of textiles. Between the lines, using the clear liquid of the sympathetic stain, he meticulously recorded the officers' conversation. He noted troop numbers, morale, and the state of naval readiness. Every detail, no matter how small, was included. The next day, Austin Rowe arrived, the jovial tavern keeper from Setauket, his wagon loaded with goods to sell and a long list of supplies to buy. He entered Townsend's shop, loudly haggling over the price of sugar and tea, playing his part to perfection. As the transaction concluded, Townsend passed him a heavy bolt of cloth. "A gift for your wife for her troubles," he said with a nod. Tucked deep within the fabric was the seemingly innocent letter. Neither man betrayed a hint of the life and death secret that had just passed between them. The 55-mile journey back to Setauket was a gauntlet of fear. Rowe knew every road, every shortcut, every hidden path, but the British patrols were unpredictable. The most feared were the Queen's Rangers, a loyalist dragoon regiment known for their brutal efficiency. As Rowe neared the village of Hempstead, a patrol of green-coated rangers appeared over a rise in the road, blocking his path. His heart leapt into his throat. He pulled his wagon to a halt, his hand steady on the reins, his face a picture of bucolic innocence. "Where are you coming from?" the sergeant asked, his eyes cold and suspicious as they swept over Rowe's wagon. "The city, sir," Rowe replied, "fetching supplies for my tavern in Setauket, and a bit of cloth for the missus." The sergeant dismounted, prodding the sacks in the back of the wagon with his bayonet. He picked up the bolt of cloth, weighing it in his hand. Rowe's blood ran cold. The letter was in there. A discovery would mean a swift journey to the gallows. For a long, agonizing moment, the ranger stared at the fabric. Then, with a grunt of disinterest, he tossed it back. "Move along, and keep your eyes open for rebel sympathizers. They're like rats in the barn." Rowe nodded, offered a weak smile, and flicked the reins. He didn't breathe easily until the patrol was a mile behind him. Under the cover of darkness, he reached the outskirts of Setauket. He didn't go to his tavern. Instead, he steered his wagon towards Abraham Woodhull's farm. He slowed as he passed a large, hollowed-out tree in a secluded pasture. Without stopping, he reached into the wagon, grabbed the bolt of cloth, and tossed it into the tree's opening. The dead drop was complete. He drove on, never looking back. Hours later, Abraham Woodhull, Samuel Culper, retrieved the package. Inside his barn, by the light of a single shielded lantern, he worked with a partner he trusted implicitly, his father, Judge Woodhull. The judge, a pillar of the community, had initially been wary of the scheme, but his own mistreatment at the hands of the British had hardened his resolve. Together, they treated the letter with the reagent, watching as the invisible words slowly materialized, a ghostly script appearing between the lines of commercial chatter. The intelligence was vital. Woodhull knew he had to get it across the Sound immediately. The next morning, a black petticoat appeared on Anna Strong's clothesline, flapping innocently in the sea breeze. Next to it, she carefully pinned 4 white handkerchiefs. Miles away, on the water, Caleb Brewster peered through his spyglass from the deck of his whaleboat, which was disguised as a simple fishing vessel. He saw the signal. The black petticoat meant a message was ready. The 4 handkerchiefs told him the location, the 4th prearranged cove, a secluded spot known as Conscience Bay.
That night, under a sliver of moon, Woodhull made his way to the bay, the coded message tucked inside his boot. The air was still and cold. Every snapped twig sounded like a musket shot. He waited, his nerves stretched taut. Soon he heard the faint rhythmic splash of muffled oars. Brewster's whaleboat slid out of the darkness like a phantom. "Any trouble?" whispered Brewster, his voice a low growl. "Not yet," Woodhull replied, handing him the message. "Townsend reports 2 regiments moving to Stony Point, and the Eagle is laid up for repairs." "Good work," Brewster grunted, tucking the message into an oilskin pouch. "Talmadge will be pleased." But as Brewster's men began to push off, a new sound cut through the night, the crunch of boots on gravel from the path above the cove. A British patrol. They had been seen. "Go!" Woodhull hissed, scrambling back into the underbrush. An officer's voice shouted, "Halt! In the name of the king!" A musket flashed in the darkness, the ball skipping across the water just feet from the whaleboat. Brewster didn't hesitate. "Row!" he roared. "Row like your souls depend on it!" The whaleboat surged forward, its 8 oars digging deep. It was built for speed, a slim, fast vessel designed for chasing whales, and now for outrunning the king's justice. The British patrol boat, a heavier, clumsier craft, lumbered out of a nearby inlet to give chase. Muskets cracked, sending flashes of orange into the night, the balls splashing harmlessly in their wake. Brewster, a master of these waters, steered them through a treacherous channel between 2 submerged rocks that he knew would tear the bottom out of the deeper-drafted patrol boat. They heard a sickening crunch of wood on stone, followed by enraged shouts that faded as the whaleboat flew across the Sound, leaving the crippled patrol and the shores of Long Island behind. Hours later, a mud-spattered and exhausted Caleb Brewster delivered the oilskin pouch to Major Benjamin Talmadge at his headquarters in Connecticut. Talmadge decoded the message using his dictionary, his excitement growing with every deciphered word. He immediately rode to General Washington's camp. Washington read the report in silence, his expression grim but focused. "This is it, Ben," he said, tapping the paper. "This is the advantage we've been looking for. They believe Stony Point is secure enough to be held with a winter garrison. They are underestimating our resolve." He looked at the intelligence on the HMS Eagle, and knowing their most powerful ship of the line is out of commission gives us a window of opportunity on the water. The information from the Culper Ring's first successful operation didn't win the war in a single stroke, but it was a start. It was a pinprick of light in the suffocating darkness. For the first time, Washington was not blind. The chain of whispers, forged in secrecy and maintained by the quiet courage of ordinary people, was holding. In the occupied streets of New York, the quiet merchant went back to listening. In the fields of Setauket, the reluctant farmer kept watch. And on the wind-swept waters of the Sound, the daring whaleboat captain waited for the next signal to appear on the line. The game was afoot, and its stakes were the birth of a nation.
Chapter 3. An Army on Paper. The summer of 1780 arrived with a suffocating humidity that left the colonies gasping for air. But a fresh wind of hope was blowing from across the Atlantic. After years of careful diplomacy by Benjamin Franklin, a French expeditionary force under the command of General Rochambeau, complete with a powerful naval fleet, was sailing to their aid. Their arrival could finally tip the scales of the war. But for the Culper Ring, this hope brought a new and terrifying urgency. The British knew the French were coming, and Sir Henry Clinton would do everything in his power to crush them before they could even set foot on American soil. In his New York coffee house, Robert Townsend served ale to a group of British naval officers, his movements calm and methodical, betraying none of the turmoil in his mind. Their conversation, lubricated by drink, was dangerously unguarded. "Clinton's in a fury," one captain slurred, gesturing with his mug. "He's pulling troops from Phillipsburg and loading them onto transports. He means to hit the French the moment they make landfall at Newport, burn their ships in the harbor before Rochambeau's men can even disembark." Another officer, a logistics aide, nodded grimly. 6,000 of our best men. The plan is to sail from Huntington Bay. It's a perfect staging ground, and the rebels will never see it coming." Townsend felt a chill run down his spine despite the sweltering heat. An attack on the French fleet upon its arrival would be a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. It would not only destroy the army sent to help them, but would also shatter the fragile alliance with France, likely ending any hope of American independence. This was not just intelligence, it was a ticking clock, and the fate of the revolution was at stake. He knew the regular communication chain, reliable as it was, might be too slow. The information needed to reach Washington immediately. That night, Townsend activated a secondary emergency protocol. He met with a contact known only in the Ring's correspondence as Agent 355. The identity of this agent was the most closely guarded secret of the network, a woman of high social standing in New York who moved within Loyalist circles and had access to British military intelligence at the highest levels. She was sharp, resourceful, and utterly committed to the cause. She took a summary of the intelligence from Townsend, promising to get it to a courier who could bypass the first few links of the chain and deliver it directly to a contact on the mainland. Meanwhile, Townsend prepared a more detailed report for the primary route. He encoded the troop numbers, the target, Newport, Rhode Island, and the secret staging ground at Huntington Bay, Long Island. He passed the message to Austin Roe, who understood the gravity of the situation instantly. Roe's ride that week was the most harrowing of his life. The British, preparing for their massive troop movement, had tightened security across Long Island. Checkpoints were everywhere. Roe was stopped and searched 3 times, his wagon's contents scrutinized by suspicious dragoons. Each time, his simple demeanor and well-rehearsed story held up. Each time he felt the hangman's noose tighten around his neck. He finally reached the dead drop, his nerves shredded, and tossed the message into the hollowed-out tree for Woodhall. The signal went up on Anna Strong's clothesline, and Caleb Brewster made his perilous night crossing. When the decoded message reached Washington's headquarters, it confirmed the preliminary warning that had arrived via Agent 355's emergency channel. The general paced his tent like a caged lion. We cannot move our army to Newport, even if we could get there in time. It would leave the Hudson Highlands and West Point completely exposed. Clinton would simply pivot and take the key to the continent. We would be trading one disaster for another. So we cannot meet them with force, Talmadge mused, his mind racing. Then we must meet them with deception. A plan began to form, audacious and incredibly risky. If they couldn't move their real army, they would create a fake one, an army on paper. "We will create a set of captured documents," Washington declared, a spark in his eyes. "Dispatches outlining a detailed and imminent plan for our army to attack New York City. We will make Clinton believe that his headquarters are our true target." For the next 48 hours, Talmadge and Washington's aides worked feverishly. They drafted fake orders, fake troop movement schedules, and fake letters between American generals discussing the weaknesses in New York's defenses. The documents were filled with authentic-sounding details, regimental numbers, supply requests, and reconnaissance reports, all designed to be utterly convincing. The level of detail was Washington's masterstroke. It had to feel real. The final piece of the puzzle was getting the documents into Clinton without arousing suspicion. A courier couldn't simply defect. The British were wary of double agents. The papers had to be captured in a believable skirmish. Townsend himself led the mission. He selected a handful of his most trusted dragoons. A reliable courier was given the packet of false dispatches and instructed to ride along a specific route known to be patrolled by the British. Townsend and his men would act as the courier's escort. They rode out at dawn. As they approached a wooded pass, a British patrol, larger than their own, emerged exactly where Townsend had predicted. "Ambush!" Townsend yelled, playing his part. A chaotic but carefully choreographed skirmish erupted. Muskets fired, swords clashed, and men shouted. The American courier, as planned, broke away from the main group, making a panicked dash for freedom. The British, seeing the courier trying to escape, immediately gave chase, believing he must be carrying something important. After a short pursuit, they captured him. Townsend and the rest of his dragoons retreated, melting back into the woods. The bait had been taken. The captured dispatches were rushed to Sir Henry Clinton's headquarters in New York. He spread the papers across his desk, his brow furrowed in concentration. The plans were detailed, specific, and seemingly confirmed by his own intelligence on Washington's positions. The threat was credible. An attack on New York, with its vast stores of supplies and loyalist population, was a nightmare scenario. Leaving the city to attack a fleet in Newport while Washington marched on his undefended rear would be an act of military suicide. He cursed Washington's audacity. He had no choice. Orders were immediately dispatched. The transports preparing to carry 6,000 troops to attack the French were to be unloaded. The regiments were to be recalled and moved to strengthen the defenses of New York City. The ambitious plan to crush the French alliance at its birth was abandoned. A few days later, the French fleet under Admiral de Ternay sailed peacefully into Newport Harbor. General Rochambeau and his 5,500 soldiers disembarked on American soil without a single shot being fired. The Franco-American alliance was secure. In his headquarters, George Washington allowed himself a rare, thin smile. No battle had been fought, no cannons had been fired, but he had just won one of the most significant victories of the war. It was a silent victory, won not by an army of flesh and blood, but by an army on paper, and by the courage of a handful of secret agents, a merchant, a farmer, a tavern keeper, and a whaleboat captain, who fought their battles in the shadows. The Cooper Ring had proven it was more than an intelligence network. It was a weapon, and soon that weapon would be needed to uncover the most dangerous threat of all, a traitor in their very midst.
Chapter 4. The Betrayal at West Point. By the autumn of 1780, a weary stalemate had settled over the war. Victories were small, losses were bitter,
and the patriotic fervor of 1776 had been worn down by years of hardship. It was in this climate of exhaustion and frustration that the greatest threat to the revolution began to fester, not on the battlefield, but in the heart of one of its most celebrated heroes. In New York, Robert Townsend began to hear whispers. They were fragmented, uncertain, but deeply unsettling. He heard of a secret correspondence conducted through intermediaries between a very senior American general and Sir Henry Clinton's headquarters. The British contact point was Major John Andre, Clinton's charming, ambitious, and dangerously capable chief of intelligence. The American traitor's identity was a closely guarded secret, but Townsend's sources provided a few chilling clues. The general was a renowned battlefield commander. He felt he had been repeatedly passed over for promotion and recognition by the Continental Congress, and he was crippled by debt. Townsend's blood ran cold. Several names fit the description, but one stood out: Major General Benedict Arnold. A hero of Ticonderoga, a key figure at Saratoga, Arnold was known for his incredible bravery. He was also infamous for his extravagant lifestyle, his prideful, tempestuous nature, and his open bitterness toward Congress. Recently, he had lobbied for and been given command of the fortress at West Point. West Point was not just a fort, it was the key to the continent. Perched on the Hudson River, its interlocking defenses and massive chain across the water prevented the British from sailing north, effectively cutting New England off from the rest of the colonies. If West Point fell, the British would control the Hudson, the rebellion would be split in two, and the war would almost certainly be lost. The thought that a man like Arnold could betray such a vital post was almost too monstrous to contemplate. Townsend knew he couldn't send such an explosive, unproven accusation through his regular channels. It was too dangerous. He wrote a cryptic message to Woodhull, speaking only of a dangerous plot involving a high-ranking officer and our most important defensive post on the Hudson. He urged Talmadge to be on high alert. The message, delivered by the usual chain, deeply disturbed Benjamin Talmadge. He brought the warning to Washington, who was equally horrified. Washington respected Arnold's military genius, but he was also aware of his flaws. Yet to act against a celebrated general based on a spy's vague warning was impossible. All they could do was watch and wait and pray they were wrong. The plot was moving faster than they knew. In late September, Arnold and Andre arranged a secret face-to-face meeting to finalize the handover of West Point. Under the cover of darkness, Andre was rowed ashore from the British sloop of war, the Vulture, and met with Arnold in the woods near Stony Point. Arnold gave him a cache of documents, detailed maps of the fortress, troop deployment schedules, and instructions on how to bypass its defenses. In return, Andre promised him £20,000, a king's ransom, and a general's commission in the British Army. But the plan went awry. An American patrol on the riverbank fired on the Vulture, forcing it to move downriver and leaving Andre stranded behind enemy lines. Forced to travel back to New York by land, Andre made a fateful error. Against Clinton's direct orders, he removed his scarlet officer's coat and donned civilian clothes. He was no longer an officer on a mission. He was now officially a spy. The next morning, near Tarrytown, 3 rough-looking men, part-time militiamen named John Paulding, Isaac Van Wart, and David Williams, stepped out from the woods and stopped him. Believing them to be loyalists, Andre foolishly identified himself as a British officer. Realizing his mistake, he quickly tried to backtrack, presenting the pass signed by General Arnold. But it was too late. Their suspicions were aroused. They searched him. Finding nothing in his pockets, they were about to let him go when one of them insisted they check his boots. And there, tucked inside his stocking, they found the papers. They couldn't read well,
But they understood maps. They saw the words West Point. They saw Arnold's signature. They knew instantly that they had stumbled upon something of immense importance. André, in a panic, offered them his horse, his gold watch, and a promise of a massive fortune if they would let him go. The militiamen, poor as they were, refused. "We would not let you go for 10,000 guineas, Paulding reportedly said. They delivered their prisoner to the nearest Continental Army post. The local commander, completely unsuspicious of his own superior officer, made a catastrophic decision. He sent a letter to General Arnold informing him that his agent had been captured. By a stroke of sheer luck, the documents themselves were sent to General Washington, who was on his way to inspect West Point at that very moment. The messenger carrying the damning papers to Washington crossed paths with Major Talmadge, who was on patrol. As head of Washington's intelligence, Talmadge was asked to examine the prisoner. He instantly recognized the captured man's handwriting from intercepted letters as that of John Anderson, the code name used by Major André. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with terrifying clarity. The spy was André. The pass was from Arnold. The fortress was West Point. The vague warning from Culper Jr. was now a horrifying reality. Talmadge ordered the prisoner held and immediately sent a rider to intercept the message going to Washington, urging the general to come with all speed. A desperate race against time began.
Chapter 5. The Fading Light. The exposure of Benedict Arnold's treason sent a shockwave of paranoia through both armies. In New York, a furious Sir Henry Clinton, humiliated by the capture and execution of his favorite aide, Major André, launched a ruthless crackdown. The hunt for Washington's spies, the phantoms who had outwitted him for years, intensified to a fever pitch. For the Culper ring, the world shrank. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Robert Townsend, known now to the British as a person of interest due to his tangential connection to some of the captured conspirators, was forced to go into hiding. He temporarily ceased all intelligence gathering, his silence leaving a gaping hole in the network. The constant fear of discovery, which had always been a dull ache in the back of his mind, now became a sharp, stabbing pain. The danger was no longer abstract. It had a face and a name. The ring suffered a devastating blow during this period of heightened scrutiny. Agent 355, the enigmatic woman who had played such a crucial role in uncovering the Arnold plot, was captured. Her true identity remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of the Revolution, but her fate was brutal. She was imprisoned on the infamous British prison ship, the HMS Jersey, a floating hell where thousands of American prisoners died of disease and starvation. It is believed she died there, her name and sacrifice lost to the official records of history, known only to the few who mourned her in secret. Despite the losses and the immense risk, the ring persevered. Abraham Woodhull, now the primary source of intelligence, became more cautious than ever. He relied on scraps of information from sailors and farmers, piecing together a picture of British movements with painstaking care. Caleb Brewster continued his daredevil crossings of the Sound, now dodging even more frequent and aggressive British patrols who were hunting for him specifically. As the war moved south, the ring's intelligence played a final, decisive role. In the summer of 1781, Washington was planning a joint Franco-American operation. The primary question was where to strike, the British stronghold in New York City or Lord Cornwallis's army, which had been cornered in Virginia. Washington masterfully created another deception, making Clinton believe New York was the target. The Culper ring fed this deception, sending false reports about preparations for a siege of the city. Convinced that New York was about to be attacked, Clinton kept his massive army garrisoned there, even sending urgent requests to Cornwallis for reinforcements. He refused to send aid south to Virginia, believing it was a secondary theater. It was a fatal miscalculation.
Washington marched the bulk of his and Rochambeau's forces south with incredible speed. By the time Clinton realized he had been duped, it was too late. The combined American and French forces had trapped Cornwallis at Yorktown. The French fleet, commanded by Admiral de Grasse, blockaded the Chesapeake Bay, cutting off any hope of escape or reinforcement by sea. On October 19, 1781, Lord Cornwallis surrendered his entire army. The news at Yorktown shattered the British will to continue the war. The news reached Setauket not in a secret dispatch, but on the winds of public celebration. For the members of the Copper Ring, the moment was surreal. The war that had consumed their lives, that had forced them to live in the shadows and fear for their families, was effectively over. One evening, Anna Strong walked to her clothesline. For the last time, she took down the black petticoat and the white handkerchiefs. The signal was no longer needed. The chain of